Hello, parents and guardians of CISD 3rd and 5th grade learners. My name is Dina Dinas, and I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning for the Coppell Independent School District. I want to thank you for spending a couple of minutes with us today so we can talk a little bit about the 3rd and 5th grade GT assessment practice we utilize here in Coppell ISD. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that moms and dads, guardians, if you've had a 3rd or a 5th grader go through our system before, our practice has been modified slightly based on the revised plan for the education of gifted and talented learners from the state of Texas. As I said on the previous slide, the state plan has been revised, and so CISD has revised our screening practices to align with the new state plan. Reference is made throughout this presentation to the accountability standards in the chapter in the state plan should you want that for your reference. The state plan is the anchor for the services that we provide for our gifted and talented learners. Likewise, we had a program evaluation in the spring of 2013 that further informs our practices. Our service model is fluid and responsive to the needs of our learners. I think that's the most important thing about the service we provide, and it is also important to note that a learner doesn't have to be gifted and talented in order to benefit from the services provided by our campus GTI specialists. The first thing that all learners really are exposed to is classroom instruction that has an element of extension built into it. This is where our campus GTI specialists are co-planning with our classroom educators to make sure that that extension is happening for learners who have demonstrated that they understand the high priority standards as they have been identified by the classroom educators. The second thing is classroom differentiation, and this is where planning has occurred with the classroom educator and the GTI specialist, where learners can be interacting with extended content or have a differentiated process or product by which they are demonstrating their understanding or approaching that classroom content from. In this case, the GTI specialist may be co-planning or co-instructing in a classroom with our learners. And again, all learners can benefit from that. And then the other support that's often provided by our GT specialists is push in and pull out. Learners who need perhaps a small group that's happening in the classroom that could be facilitated by the GT specialist, or learners may be pulled out for an extension activity or independent project as facilitated and supported by the gifted specialist. Again, a learner does not have to be identified GT in order to have access to those services on that continuum at one time or another in their elementary career. As we talk about GT assessment for 3rd and 5th grade, I do want to point out some of the correlations to the state plan. First, we will use 3 or more measures to identify learners, and those will be both qualitative and quantitative. In terms of learners who are English language learners, we will assess them in a language they understand or with a nonverbal assessment. And then finally, if a learner was identified in kindergarten and is now, or 1st grade and is now going into 3rd grade, that learner will not assess, and that is because the state plan says that if reassessment occurs at all, it should occur no more than once in elementary grades. So if we've already identified them, it isn't necessary for us to assess again. But all 5th graders in the district, unless they were identified in 4th grade because they came to us from another district or another country, all 5th graders will test. That's part of our supporting those learners as they move into middle school. One of the quantitative data points that we will utilize as part of the GT identification process for 3rd and 5th graders will be the administration of an aptitude test. For most learners in the district, that will happen for the week of October 7th through the 10th, except for some of our friends at Denton Creek Elementary who already have a trip planned during that time. There'll be an alternate date set for those learners. We don't release the name of the exam or the form we use in order to preserve the integrity of the assessment process. This is about identifying a need, not studying for something. That assessment will be administered over the series of 3 days, and just like with any other assessment, we recommend that your learner get a good night's sleep and have a good breakfast and bring snacks on those assessment days. You'll hear more about that from your campus as we get closer to the testing date. So the results of the aptitude test will be one of the quantitative data points that we utilize in GT identification. Others might include MAP data. MAP is Measure of Academic Performance, which is the pre-assessment that's being given to all learners sometime in the first 6 weeks of school or so that helps guide our instruction. It is a computer-administered test, and it really doesn't have a ceiling, so it lets us know when learners know content beyond the grade level. Classroom performance data may be collected for a learner that's quantitative in nature, and occasionally we'll utilize STAR assessment data, but we're careful about that as while we celebrate when a learner has learned something at high levels, that data only tells us so much because it really is about just grade level standards. And then if we have any other standardized assessment results from a learner, we may look at that as an additional quantitative data point. Qualitative data also needs to be gathered as part of the identification process, and therefore we may include things like learner interviews, teacher rating scales, potentially a portfolio of learner work where they've done some reflection on this is why I'm proud of this. This is something that is really of interest to me. And or we may have some parent input or questionnaires as part of the identification process should we find that necessary. Things that are often telling as part of the qualitative data points are things like an advanced sense of humor or sophisticated vocabulary, learners who have a great deal of empathy or are very sensitive, those that bring a unique perspective to a problem or a challenge they're facing, and those that may be learning at an accelerated level. As I said before, the aptitude assessment will be administered for most learners in the district from October 7th through the 10th, and those scores will be sent home the week before Thanksgiving break. It will just be the scores. It won't be a compilation of that quantitative data with the other qualitative data sources. It will just be the scores from the aptitude assessment. In late November, early December, the Campus Gifted and Talented committees will meet to look at all of the data sources and determine which learners might demonstrate a need for consistent GT services. Parents will be notified of those committees' decisions the week before winter break, and services will begin no later than January 21st, 2020, pending the return of parent permission to serve. This information pertains primarily to 5th grade learners and their parents or guardians. Any learner that is currently identified or is identified through our GT assessment process this school year in 5th grade, the way they are identified will impact the courses that they may enroll in moving into middle school. So, for example, if a learner is identified quantitative and or nonverbal identification, they will be eligible to enroll in math and science courses in middle school that are GT designated. If a learner is identified qualitative or verbal identification, that learner will be allowed to enroll in GT, language arts, and social studies courses. Any learner that's identified general intellectual ability may enroll in all or some of the core courses, so that's language arts, math, science, and social studies that are identified GT. Very often we early identify GT learners as general intellectual ability, and as they matriculate through the system, we start to see where their areas of passion and gifts truly lie. It is not uncommon to have a learner who is identified general intellectual ability in the early grades, then be identified as just math, science, or language arts, social studies. Very few of us are gifted in all things, but really have a bent or a passion towards one direction or another. If a learner requires additional assessment, in order for the committee to make an informed decision, you will be notified on an individual basis about what that assessment practice might look like for your learner. CISD far exceeds the assessment practices as recommended and required by the state plan for gifted education. We screen universally at kinder, third, and fifth grades. As learners matriculate through CISD and enter their secondary career, middle school and high school learners are screened upon referral. Any questions regarding the GT assessment practice can be addressed to me, Dina Dinas, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and my email address is ddinas@coppellisd.com. We are looking forward to the 2019-2020 school year, and we're excited you're here.